Alright, so this is coding problem 3.4.4, dealing with functions, and basically we're going to write a function called lucky sevens that takes in one parameter, which is a string, and it's called a string. Our function should return true if there are exactly three sevens in a string. If there are less than three or more than three sevens, we need to return false. So these sevens don't have to be in a row, they just have to be any sevens within our strings. We'll consider them as 1. And so, alright, and it says a hint is use a loop to look at each character in a string. So let's go ahead and start our function. And like with all functions, we must define it first. So we use def, and then our function name, which is lucky sevens. And then we have a parameter, so inside of parentheses we will put a string, and this a string, when a user is calling your function, they'll go ahead and put in whatever they want a string to equal. So yeah, that's why it's a parameter. And then so we can start here, and so this would be a way that would be incorrect to code this problem, but it's a very common mistake, so I'm going to code it the wrong way first and then show you how to fix it. So a wrong way to do is, so we're going to loop through this string, right? And so it'd be like for, we can do character, so we'll do like car in a string. So with each iteration, it'll grab the next character. And then if we do count is equal to 0 here. So what this count does is this count's going to store how many times the 7 shows up in the string, right? And then we want to check to see if the letter's equal to this the string of 7. So we would do if statement, a conditional. So we do if, and then remember with our for loop, since each letter is a value of car during the iteration, we want to use the variable car. So if car is equal to, remember the double equals is for comparison, and a single equals is for assignment. So in our conditional, we want to use a double equals. So equal equals 7. And remember, it's not the integer 7. It would be the string of 7, because since you're iterating through a string, these 7s are still in a string. So if car is equal to 7, then we know that this is, if this is true, then we know that there's been at least one 7 in there. So we do count, if we do +1, like that. And then, so basically we've gone through our for loop and we've checked to see if the character is equal to 7. And if it is, we're increasing count by 1. And then we need to do, hold on. Alright, so then if we do if count is equal to 3, then we want to return, since it asks us to return in the directions. So if it is equal to 3, we'll return true, and then else we will return false. Alright, so if we try running this code, alright, so it gives us false, 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 false for these test cases here. And these should be true, true, false, false. Alright, so there's a couple errors in this code. The first thing is count will never equal 3, because in for each character, so for each iteration, count is getting resetted to 0 because it's within the for loop. You want to keep a counter for the amount of times that 7 shows up within the entire string. So this line right here, so you have to initialize your counter outside the for loop. Sorry. Alright, so you have to initialize it outside, so that way every time there is a 7, it can just add on to whatever was already there instead of resetting it back to 0. Because when it was inside, count was always going to equal 0 or 1, depending on the string. All right, the second thing is if character is equal to 7, your count plus 1. And so what this is right here is it adds 1, but it never gets assigned back to anything. So it's just kind of there. So count would still equal 0 in this case. So what you want to do is you want to count is plus equals 1. So that basically says count is equal to count plus 1. It's just shorthand for that. So that way, every time there is a 7, count's going to increase by 1. Another thing is, since this if statement is right underneath the for loop, so it's within the for loop, for each iteration, it's also going to check if count equals 3. And if it does, it'll return true, or also return false. And the thing about return statements is the minute it hits a return, it stops your code. So in this case, if there were 3 at 1, so if we ran through it the first time, right, with let's do happy 777 BJ. So basically for the first time, character would equal H, and if H is equal to 7, which is not, it doesn't add anything to count, and then checks the statement right here, and if count is equal to 3, which is not, because at this point count is equal to 0, this statement's false, so it goes to the else and returns false. So that's why in here it shows you false instead of true, and it doesn't go through the rest of the code because the minute it hit a return statement, it completes the code. So what you want to do is you want to check if count equals 3 outside the for loop, because you want the iteration to finish running through the entire string before this conditional is checked. All right, so this is what the code should look like. This is the correct code. Also, if you notice here, when you're testing out your cases, you're using print, and then you're calling the function, and you're inputting a parameter. So basically, the reason why it prints out false to the console is because the return, whatever the value is of the return statement, is the value of the function call. So for Lucky Sevens, happy 777 BJ, since it did return true, true is equal to this function call right here. So when it prints whatever the value is of this, which is true. And so when we run this code, it prints true, true, and false, false.